Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Dan Finley, and this is The Story Grind. It's a show where we take a look at novels, comics, films, and TV shows, break them down to their basic elements, and look at different techniques for becoming better storytellers. Story Grind is brought to you by the stories that I make. If you want to follow along on my story writing journey, subscribe to the monthly newsletter where I give monthly updates. Links to both are in the description below. If you really like the show, please like, follow, and subscribe and share with your friends. Your support means a lot. Alright, today we're taking a look at Duke issue number 1, a comic by Skybound Comics, published through Image, and is written by Joshua Williamson, art by Tom Riley, color by Jordi Belair, and letter is Russ Wooten. This one takes a little bit of preamble, because if you don't know who Duke is, he's actually a character in the cartoon series G.I. Joe. What has happened with this book is Robert Kirkman, the guy who is known for The Walking Dead and Invincible, he got the rights to both G.I. Joe and Transformers. And what he's done is he's created he's calling the Energon universe. So he's combining both G.I. Joe and Transformers into one. What we're going to experience now is sort of a kind of reimagining. I'm not quite clear on if this is taking place in any specific timeline or just rebooting it or whatnot, but it is taking a lot of elements from, let's say, like G.I. Joe the cartoon series or G.I. Joe the cartoon movie, and I'm assuming some of the comics that came out from Marvel Comics as well. And it's incorporating some of them and kind of building a new mythology moving forward. But let's take a few steps back and take a look at G.I. Joe and sort of like a little bit of the history to kind of give us a little bit of context for all of us. I'd say Duke number 1 it's strange because it's one character kind of being pulled out of the G.I. Joe franchise, and we're focusing in on him. And there's both sort of a luxury and a burden that comes with working on a character that's been around for over 30 years now. And let's see, we're looking at G.I. Joe originally came out in 1964 as those like giant dolls. And then they became action figures sort of in the 1980s. I believe the Marvel Comics produced a comic in 1982, and then the cartoon series started around 1983. And I believe Duke, the actual character, was a mail-away action figure that sort of became the leader of the G.I. Joe group in the cartoon series. So there's both a luxury and a burden to this, in that the luxury is that you've now got like so many decades of history that people, have kind of watched and are familiar with. And I'll give you my own personal experience. Like, I used to play with G.I. Joes as a kid. I used to watch the cartoon. I believe I saw the movie. And then I kind of stopped with G.I. Joe completely after growing up a little bit. And then the movies came out, the live action movies came out. And I remember watching those, and they were fine. I don't remember much about them, though. So kind of coming into G.I. Joe and reading Duke number 1, there's a lot I'm kind of familiar with and a lot I don't quite remember. And I had to look up a lot of characters. And I'm assuming a lot of people are in that similar position where you remember some stuff, you don't remember some other stuff, but you're just kind of going with it. There's a burden to that as well, which is there are people who have like really followed G.I. Joe for decades, and now they're starting a new series. And how do you not only just get people on board for something new and fresh, but how do you keep the people who've always stuck around and keep them on board and not sort of push them to the side with something too new and fresh? So it's a very delicate balance. And I gotta say, like, I think the way this team has done it has been really interesting. And for me personally, being someone sort of a passive G.I. Joe fan, I really enjoyed it. So we're going to take a look at some of the different story elements. So we're going to break this down and look at some really cool storytelling techniques that I discovered during my reading. So first, let's start out with the story map. So this is going to start at the bottom, and we're going to work our way up. So the story begins right at Act 1, right at the bottom here. We're going to look at Scene 1 and progressively move forward until we get to the end of the issue. So let's open up with the first scene. which is a 3-page scene. Sort of action, I would call it like pseudo action. It's almost more like a highlight reel of Duke's life, giving us an introduction to the character as well as an introduction to his ordinary world, which is really important when establishing a story. Keep in mind that this is contemporary storytelling, so we don't need to give too much background. It's like we know that we have a guy, he's in the military. That's really about all you need to know when it comes to like world building. So let's take a closer look at some of these panels. We open up with Duke in some sort of basic training scenario, and we have sort of a disembodied voice giving us a voiceover. It says, even in boot camp, it was clear you had the right stuff. Top of your class, exceeded all expectations. A leader on the battlefield and off. Countless successful extractions, rescue missions with 0 collateral damage. From day one, it's been clear that you are, and then we go to page 2 and 3, which is a double-page splash, which is pretty amazing. And the big bold text says, a man of action. So what do we have here? This is 3 pages of highlight reel of Duke's life. And you can see it's sort of like this really nice sort of like orange glow, almost sort of nostalgic in a way. We can see like him progress from training to leading to rescuing flood victims. And then we got a shot of him in a plane leading up to this double page spread where we get the quintessential American propaganda, right? It's a man holding a child in one arm, holding a gun in the other arm, in the other hand, and shooting bad guys in the face, right? Most likely, big explosion behind him. It's very much an action movie, but what's really interesting about this is that it's 3 pages of setup, and I really like how this is established. This is sort of the idea of what G.I. Joe is, the basics of like American hero saving lives, doing what they need to do to make the world a safer place, right? And at this point, we still don't know who is saying all these great things about this character of Duke. But that's the end of scene 1. So let's move into scene 2, which is 6 pages. And look at that. We now have Duke. The sunset glow is gone. He's hunched over. He's sitting in a chair. He looks angry. He's got a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow going on. And he's a mess. What I really like about this is that we've taken this highlight reel of like better times, and with a page flip, we've shown the situation he's in now, which is hunched over and disheveled and angry. And what this does for the reader, which is really, I think, really smart, is it creates a question in the reader's mind: what happened, right? And to kind of get a reader engaged in that way, to have that question that they want answered within 4 pages, that's pretty amazing to me. I think it's a really great technique that you can use to get readers engaged and invested. I mean, you're probably not going to be too invested by saying like what happened, but within 4 pages, you've got a little bit of the hook. And now you're there'll be a little bit more as we go along, but sort of a really nice, brilliant way to start a reader's investment. And then not only that, we get this disembodied voice, this voiceover that we saw during the highlight reel comes back in, and we realize that it's actually someone speaking off panel and says, "None of that means jack now. What happened to you, Conrad? Insubordination, carelessness, you're barely in uniform." Yeah, we have that setup of, model military, model soldier versus now he's done the complete opposite of that. Now, I really want to take a close look at the art here. Being an artist myself, I got to tell you, like, if I were tasked with drawing Duke in this situation, I probably would have made him look a little more roughed up, a little more of a 5 o'clock shadow, maybe scuffed up his clothes a little bit more. But I can tell you that definitely would have been the wrong way to go. Because think about it, he's in the military. He's not going to have like tears in his pants. Like, I think my instinct would have been completely wrong. And I think the instinct that we have here is completely right. He's still in uniform, but somehow the artist is making him still look disheveled. He looks hunched over. His, you see sort of the wrinkles in his clothes, and his fabric is just sort of almost representing this sort of crumpled look of a person. And then we also have sort of these slatted blinds that are creating a bit of contrast. That's sort of a very like cinematic feel that we frequently see, kind of depicting a man divided, right? Which is going to come forward in the next few pages. But as we scroll down the page, we're going to see who's been talking this whole time, and it's Hawk. And I believe in the cartoon it's General Hawk, but I think right now in the comic it's Colonel Hawk. So imagine Duke sitting there and he's saying all these good things about himself, right? Immediately as a reader you're thinking, oh, I don't necessarily believe everything he says. Like when you have a character saying these things about themselves, there's a certain amount of distrust. But when you have another individual saying great things about this character, you immediately believe what is said about that character, right? Not only is it another person saying it, it's his commanding officer, right? It's his supervisor, it's his boss who's saying all these great things about him. And because you hear it coming out of his mouth, it immediately gives credibility to Duke as a character, as far as like his heroicism, his athleticism, his military record. And then to kind of see that same supervisor say like you're sort of a disgrace now, again sort of feeds into that idea of what happened between that page flip. And what happened is an inciting incident. The funny thing is this is treated in a really interesting way in that we haven't seen the inciting incident yet. But if you've read Transformers, I believe it's issue number 2, which came out the month prior, you did see the inciting incident as like a small cutaway scene that happened in Transformers that you didn't realize who the character was in that scene until like the very last panel on that page where it said his name tag Duke. So don't worry if you don't know what the inciting incident is. Josh Williamson is going to show us in a little bit of a flashback what that is and get us all caught up, which I think is another like great technique of getting us all on the same page so we can move forward with the character of Duke. So we're now in scene 2, page 5. We have our first view of Colonel Flag, and I gotta be honest. Take a look at this scene. Take a look at it is daylight outside. They've got the blinds drawn, and you have more of this sort of dramatic slatted blind look and effect, which is really great. Super dramatic. Just the idea that they're inside with like the lights off and the blinds drawn. It's a little funny, but so take a look at this. It's almost like a half-page shot of Colonel Flag, introducing another major character in this story thread. And now we're getting this moment between a soldier and his commanding officer kind of pushing back a little bit. And now we're starting to come into this moment where we see this inciting incident that happened not even off panel, I would say outside the issue a month prior. And this is sort of a really interesting, great technique visually for showing a flashback. Take a look at this. We've got not only just the color change kind of showing as a point of contrast, showing us that it's a flashback, but we've also dropped the panel border, which is really cool technique as well. And look at how sort of roughed in it is. It's almost like a chalk pastel type of edge, right? Almost like a sort of frayed vision, a frayed memory. We're starting to get a better idea of what caused this complete change in the character of Duke. Now keep in mind, this is Duke. This is from G.I. Joe. This guy is like the all-American hero leader. And to kind of even see him in this sort of state of mind it's definitely unexpected. And I think unexpected is a great technique for storytelling, right? Now, imagine if someone were to say, hey, tell us the story of Duke from G.I. Joe, and they give you the all-American hero pitch. You'd say, well, that's absolutely expected and kind of boring. So the fact that they've kind of taken him out of that and kind of thrown him in a different direction automatically gets my interest again. So there's sort of like 2 points of hooking me in now. And I'm already wanting to read more. So here we go. So Duke is questioning his supervisors. And his, Colonel Flagg says, you're turning into a walking American nightmare. And Duke has an outburst and saying, you weren't there. And then we get into this 2-page spread, which is the inciting incident in Duke's story. Again, this happened maybe a month prior in a completely different comic. And it was only like a really small scene, which just makes it kind of cool. And then we see that Duke has seen something. Essentially, we know he's seen a Transformer. Technically, I think it's Starscream he's seen. But he has no idea what this is. It's an alien robot. And he's questioning what he's seen, and his supervisors won't tell him. Not only has he seen a alien robot, but this alien robot has actually killed a friend of his. Now, this is going to play an important part a little bit later in the story. I shouldn't say important part. I'll say a point of confusion for me a little bit later in the story. And I'm wondering if you who read it also feel this way. If so, leave your thoughts in the comments below. But we'll get to it. Hold on. Here we go. So we can visually see Starscream physically splat his friend. This giant alien robot has just destroyed his friend right in front of his eyes, and Duke takes off. And not only did Duke take off, he said that this machine, this alien robot, didn't just kill his friend, it enjoyed it. On top of that, he says his friend had a baby boy, barely a year old. He was only giving him a ride back to the base as a favor. So there's a lot of guilt here in the character of Duke. And then we get to I think what is the most important moment in the forward momentum of this story, which will help propel the character. And this is on page 9, where we see Duke in a point of distress, and he says, every night I try to sleep, but whenever I close my eyes, I see that thing. Again, he still doesn't know what a Transformer is, right? But that gives us some insight into his mental state, which is really interesting. Kind of gives us his internal conflict. We're not just seeing, we're kind of peeling back the curtain of the American propaganda hero, right? And now we're seeing inside his head, and he's experiencing PTSD. He's seen a friend who's been killed in front of him. And now when he closes his eyes, he sees that thing, that monster. So all Colonel Flagg can answer with is it was an accident. And then we get into a point where I end up with a little bit of confusion, but we have Duke come back with, what about his family? Colonel Flagg answers with, we took care of him. Duke answers with lies. Now, originally, when I read this, I thought, okay, Duke is bringing back his dead friend again. That must mean it's very, very important. And honestly, at this point, I'm thinking this is a revenge story. His friend has been killed, and what's going to happen is he's going to go forward just trying to get justice for what happened to his close friends. But upon closer reading, I realized what Joshua Williamson is doing here. He's actually saying he's kind of using that the death of the friend and sort of almost physically bending the dialogue so that we can see to get us to the real theme of what the story is. And I think this is a tricky part, because it's bringing up the family again, bringing up the friend again, makes me think it's about the friend and revenge. But no, what this really is he's taking it into Duke's real point here is that he's being lied to by his supervisor, by the military, by the US government. And what we end up doing is getting into the core of what this story is. Duke is trying to seek the truth. We get some more back and forth between Colonel Flagg and Duke. And Colonel Flagg says, hey, I was wrong, you're not ready, take some time off on vacation, and then come back. Duke won't let it go. He wants more information. What did the black box show? Colonel Flagg answers with, they're classified. And then we have this outburst from Duke. They're garbage. He throws a chair, smashes it against the wall, and storms out. And he leaves with, again, a reiteration of probably the clear statement of what the theme is for this story. I have followed every order to the best of my abilities, sir, and now my country is lying to me. And again, lying is in bold, right? And then he makes this declaration that takes him out of the first act and propels him into the second act. I'm getting answers. I will know what that flying robot is, and then I'm taking it out. He wants answers. Duke is seeking the truth. Now, this is really interesting because can you think of another story out there about a character seeking the truth? And maybe you came to the same conclusion I did, is like the truth is out there, right? That's the theme of the X-Files. And which is kind of interesting because he did see an alien robot, right? So I have a feeling that the X-Files is going to play a big part as far as like a comparable story, right? And Colonel Flagg, the man who knows the truth but can't tell Duke, is what, maybe akin to that, the cigarette man in the X-Files. And our first act is done in 9 pages. 3 pages of ordinary world setup. We get to an inciting incident, which is another action scene, which is a 2-page spread plus another page. And then 2 other really important moments on page 9 is this panel 1, where we get insight into Duke's mental conflict, his internal conflict, which is really his sanity. And then that also creates a point of empathy for me as a reader, right? Just sort of like calming one's mind, just trying to make sense of things. I can absolutely get on board with that and understand that. And then we get another point of empathy, which is that he's being lied to by his supervisors, by his boss, which I think everyone can empathize with at some point, right? And but here is probably one of the most important things that I discovered while sort of studying this, analyzing it, and rereading it. Typically, right before the hero goes on their journey, there will be a refusal of the call. But if you notice that these 9 pages, well, technically this 9th page, which is where he makes his declaration to go on this adventure, there is no refusal of the call. And the thing is, that brought up a memory that I had a long time ago, which is there was one other story I remember seeing where there was no refusal of the call. And at the time, I just kind of waved it away. And that story was the first John Wick. Now, if you're not familiar with the first John Wick film, it's an action movie starring Keanu Reeves, and he plays a retired hitman until some teenagers break into his house, steal his car, and kill his puppy. I believe it's a puppy or is a dog. I don't remember, but a dog that his now deceased wife had given him. And as soon as he discovers the dead dog, that's it. He's now on a path of revenge to destroy every human being who stands in his way because of this dog. And I just remember thinking, wow, there was no refusal of the call in this moment. And that struck me as really strange because technically, usually when I see there's no refusal of a call in a story, it doesn't feel authentic to me. It doesn't feel, it feels like the character wants to go on this journey and they're a little too willing. And it feels like that they haven't really weighed their options, right? So I feel like the refusal of a call is such an important moment. But again, there's none in John Wick and there's none here in Duke. And it just got me thinking, why does this work, even though there's no refusal of the call? And then I realized, and this is probably the best discovery that I've had recently about storytelling, And the way they pull this off is so effortless, and it's definitely worth taking a closer look at. But there's no refusal of the call, because the refusal of the call is a rational state of mind, right? And when you're dealing with John Wick, which is a revenge film, or in this moment where Duke has an outburst and throws a chair, they are not in a rational state of mind. They are in an emotional state, and the idea of like pursuing justice and truth and revenge, to the point of that it angers someone and ignites that passion to get to the truth or get to the revenge, allows you to just kind of push aside the call. The refusal of the call, which is really amazing. So this is a great technique for kind of subverting that. There's actually another story, which I'll get to in another video, that kind of subverts the refusal of the call in a really interesting way. But this is a very cool way of kind of sidestepping refusal of the call and just getting that person on that journey. But I feel like it has to be very emotional, like almost irrational in a way, because again, refusal of the call is a rational state of mind. It's saying like, hey, my life is good here. I don't want to go on this adventure. I don't want to go on this journey. I can't. Things are holding me back. And they make excuses until those excuses are removed and they are forced to go on this journey. So just a really cool technique. And I'm not sure if the writer and artist are really conscious of it while they're doing this, but it's definitely something that I'm going to take into my writing and try to work in it at some point, because it's just such a brilliant technique. I really like it. So that's it. That's the end of the first act of Duke. All the rest is gravy, right? It's him progressing. We know what he needs to resolve this story. As soon as he finds the truth, it will either like satisfy him in a positive way or satisfy him and turn him into like a very negative downward spiral. You still have those two options, but at the end of the story, he is going to find the truth. Let's move into Act 2, which is the start of him seeking truth. And as you can see, we now have a jump into Scene 3, and that is 4 pages long, and it comes with the header of 6 months later. So in this next phase of storytelling, we usually have sort of the tests, allies, and enemies, right? Duke's going to push up against different various forces and find out if they're for him or against him. And this actually can go on for quite a while. But this is a really important step, because I think I don't know if you've read these kinds of stories, but I definitely have, where you get to the end of the story and then all of a sudden a new character appears to save the day. And they were not in the story previous, right? So this moment of like right after choosing to go on this adventure and meeting all these other people, sort of this first half of the story, I would say, is really important for establishing the players that will be in the rest of the story, because you don't want to have just that random person pop up at the end of the story who's brand new and just kind of help save the day or help the hero in some way. It can be a little frustrating, or it can feel a little inauthentic as well, right? So tests, allies, enemies for now up until maybe about the midpoint of the story. So let's take a look at how that works for Duke in these next few pages. So here we go. We got 4 pages in this Scene 3. And as we can see, Duke's hair's grown out a little bit. The beard's grown out a little bit. So we know time has passed, says 6 months later. As we go down, we see more kind of background for Duke. I got to give credit to the artist and writer here, because these are silent panels, really, right? I mean, these are not characters explaining where they were for 6 months. These are visually, you understand. I mean, I don't even know if you needed that 6 months later up on top, right? You understand they're in Washington, D.C. Panel 2, you see the length of his hair and beard, and you realize, okay, yeah, he's been gone for a while. Some time has passed since the last scene we just saw. And then panel 3, you see some of the books that he's reading. He's trying to get to the truth, right? He's reading books about UFOs. He's reading a book called Mindbender. I seem to remember that there was a character in G.I. Joe, I think a villain called Dr. Mindbender, Not sure if that's connected in any way. But Duke pulls up to this random house, and he ends up meeting other people who have like witnessed alien encounters in some way. But he's looking for one individual in particular. I want to bring attention to this poster in the background of this page, which says, "I want to believe." Again, the X-Files reference, right? So I think the creators here know what their source material is. They've got sort of their template, their model, and they're just going to follow it, which is great. I think it's like, again, it's sort of like it brings that familiarity to most stories where we all go, okay, yeah, I kind of know that story a little bit. So mentally, I'm going to prepare for sort of an alien seeking the truth type story. And then we get into the person he's actually here to meet, which is Dr. Adele Burkhart. Now, I didn't know who this character was. I think she has a daughter that is actually in G.I. Joe, but I'm not sure if like G.I. Joe is actually formed yet in this story. Some people online were saying like this is like probably the mother of another character that will appear in G.I. Joe. Not quite clear. I don't remember that name at all. So, but we find out that this is one of his allies, essentially. She knows some information that's going to help him get to the truth. And what that information is it leads him to a weapons manufacturer. Now, keep in mind, this is a dramatic scene. It's 4 pages long. It's a conversation between two. And we're getting a lot of information, but it's being delivered in a really interesting way. Duke is a little mistrustful. He's a little suspicious coming into this room of like weird people who've experienced alien abductions or witnessed aliens in some ways, and he almost leaves, in fact. But the doctor comes and says like, well, this is essentially how she hides the truth, is by kind of being amongst the, I don't know if she calls them the crazies. She says, it's easier to hide the truth among the ridiculous. Come on, step into my office. So now we get sort of like an entrance. Ooh, look at that. We even have this moment of the secret entrance where she pulls down a piece of the molding on the wall and it opens a secret door. Hey, who wouldn't like that? That's always cool in an alien conspiracy type story, right? The secret back room is essentially what we're being brought into. And now we see the doctor is saying like she's asking questions and they didn't like it. The people she was working for didn't like it, and she got let go. And Duke can empathize with that because he wasn't let go, but he was asking questions and pushing back, and his supervisors also didn't like it. So now we get some insight into what this doctor has seen. What she says to him is, after hearing your story, I believed you had stumbled onto a high-tech arms race, and the company on the edge of that is... And now we cut to the next scene, and that's Mars Industry. So Mars Industries is owned by or run by Destro, which is one of the villains of G.I. Joe, and he makes weapons of war. And I believe that since G.I. Joe has not formed, I believe the sort of the villains of G.I. Joe, the Cobra, is also not formed. So we've kind of come into Destro's workshop here, his factory where he's making these weapons. He infiltrates this facility, which brings us into scene 4 of this story, which is the longest scene in the entire book, which is 9 pages long. And only 3 pages of those 9 pages are action scenes. So we see Duke stealthing through the building. Now, there is a weird thing here where the doctor is talking to Duke in the previous scene, and then we get a little bit of voiceover on this new page, and then we cut back to them talking. That did throw me off a little bit. I thought that was a kind of a strange cutaway, and I'm wondering why they incorporated that, because I feel like we've been ushered into this new location. I don't really understand, and we're getting a little bit of a voiceover. I don't really understand why they cut back, but maybe the reason is because up until this point, the voiceover was the doctor speaking, and now we have Duke saying something. And if you imagine like having caption boxes and trying to make them distinct for the different characters, especially when it hasn't shown up yet, that's a little difficult. But it did take me out a little bit to kind of see them bounce back into the old location, and now we're back into the new location. But we do get to see Duke stealthing through the sewers, sneaking into the building, and then we come into another 2-page spread, which is he sees all these weapons of war that Destro has been making. Again, he probably does not know who Destro is right now, but if you look at some of these machines, some are recognizable from the G.I. Joe action figures. I can't, I think like this Cobra I think it's called a His tank, looks familiar, and maybe this little helicopter over here on the right. I'm not sure about anything else. If you see anything that you recognize, please leave a comment below and let me know. But again, we're getting to that experience that Duke is having where he's seeing these weapons of war, and now he's having flashbacks again of that giant alien robot that killed his friend. And here we go. We got like a really nice match cut between that flashback and the scene happening right now. Again, sort of the colors helping separate this. It's a lot of fun. It really, I mean, I completely understand it, and it's mostly visual. If you check it out, it's like the panel with the rough borders, very red and orange. Again, that flashback, sort of that red alert flashback, right? And then you've got the moment happening right now where a hand is also reaching out towards Duke from behind him. And then we have an introduction of a new character, which I think is Mercer, which I believe is another character in G.I. Joe. I don't remember him too well. From the little research that I did on him, apparently he was a bad guy that became a good guy, so it kind of makes sense that he's sort of working in Destro's facilities right now. But we have sort of another action scene, which is about 3 pages long, where Duke and Mercer are fighting, right? Some great visuals. Like, I really enjoy sort of the strafe lines that happen when, people are punching and whatnot. Really well done. Look at how the backgrounds drop out as the fight happens, and it makes sort of the reading visually faster. And if you notice, actually the panel borders also start to alter in shape and size, not necessarily the very static sort of gridded off look. As an action scene happens in comics, you see like time and space distort, backgrounds drop out, panels become more angular, and you get to witness this sort of action fight scene. And eventually Duke gets overpowered until he is kicked out of Destro's facilities. Then we get a little peek into Destro. We don't really get a good shot of him. It is very a shadowed figure. We get to see his little headquarters, but he knows who Duke is, and he also knows who this Dr. Adele Burkhart is. So he's gonna, instead of killing Duke right on the spot, he's gonna deal with this another way. All right, now we go into scene 5, which is 5 pages long. 2 pages are an action scene. And we see Duke on the phone saying, "I saw it, proof." Here's the thing that I don't quite get with this scene is, who is he talking to? Originally, I thought he was calling Dr. Burkhart, but then he turns, sees the door of the Dr. Burkhart's house is bashed in, and he goes in and he sees like all of these conspiracy theorists, supposed alien abductees have been gunned down, which we can assume is by Destro because of the previous scene. I really like this because the previous page was filled with white gutters, and now we're on to like a 3/4 splash page that is bleeding figuratively and literally off the page, and has been even colored sort of like deep reds and purples. And so we see that all these people have been gunned down and murdered in cold blood. We cut to a reverse shot where we see Duke's shocked look, and the next panel kind of gives us a closer look at that poster that was hanging and was obstructed behind the crowd earlier in the book. It says, "I want to believe." And again, sort of that clear reference to the X-Files, wearing your influences your sleeve. Would that be like wearing your heart on your sleeve? I'm not sure, but so Duke discovers Dr. Burke is still alive and wants to know who did it, but they stole all her research, but she has one thing that they missed, which is great. It's sort of, if you can see the scene in like positive and negative charges, it starts as a negative charge, right? I mean, we end the previous scene on a negative charge where Duke is getting kicked out of Mars facilities, and then this scene begins on that negative charge and then ends on a positive charge because he gets a clue from Dr. Burke that helps him get closer to his goal of finding the truth. And I'm not sure if this is a cell phone or maybe it's just a some kind of device, or maybe it's just like a image or diagram on the phone that's going to get him closer. They don't really explain what it is, but I'm sure in the next few issues they will. And she reiterates the sort of the driving theme for Duke right before she dies. She says, "Find the truth." But before he can say any more, the police burst in, and they suspect that he is the one who has gunned everybody down in this room. And what's really cool about this page is that, again, we start off with sort of this white gutter as he's trying to reason with the police. But the police are a sort of a shoot first, ask questions later type of organization in this comic. So they essentially open fire and they say, someone says he's got a gun, and they just start shooting. What I really like about this panel is not only does it take out that white gutter and takes this one panel and turns it into a bleed, which is really fun, but if you look at the lettering here, you have that bang, 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 which is sort of flowing up and down in the foreground. But in the background, which is really cool, is you have this blam, 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 and the lettering is almost reacting to the volume of the gunshots in the room. And you can see this sort of ghosting of the letters. The line work is almost a little bit like an orange, like a little different color, and it gives it sort of this vibrating look, which matches so well with the scene. And I love that it's in the background. It's just sort of just a great bit of lettering right there. And then that carries over into the next scene where, as you see those static panels all of a sudden start to move off kilter as this becomes an action scene. And that blam, blam, blam in the background once again as we see Duke dodging bullets, running up the second floor, and jumping out a second floor window to make his escape. And yeah, that's the end of that scene. This brings us to the final scene, which scene 6, which is only 3 pages long. We have Duke walking down the alley. He's been wounded and he's bleeding a little bit, but we get that disembodied voice again that says, "I thought Duke was just turning into a loose cannon, but now he has a mission. He'll never stop. Nothing will get in his way." We now see that we have a man on a mission. He's driven. And as we turn the page, we see who's actually saying this. And it is Colonel Hawk again, attributed to that disembodied voiceover, kind of bringing us back to the very beginning of the story when we saw him, or we should say we read his caption box, his little voiceover during that highlight reel of Duke's life, right? Now we have Colonel Hawk walking towards a helicopter. He's talking to one of his supervisors or someone in command, who's saying that is giving Colonel Hawk some pretty bad news. And Colonel Hawk responds with, "Of course, I understand. This is my mess. I hold full responsibility. I'll clean it up." What's really great about this next panel, which is a silent panel, is the amount of acting that the artists are doing in a silent panel. You see this scene, you see this moment going from him on the phone to him hanging up the phone, and you know that Colonel Hawk does not want to do what he is being asked to do, or should say commanded to do by his commanding officer, right? And it's just such a great little bit of acting. And I'll tell you, the first time I read it, I just passed over it. thinking, as I do typically when I read for the first time, I read pretty fast, right? But upon second and third read, it becomes so much more of an impactful moment. And it almost creates a point of empathy for Colonel Hawk. Like, he's kind of standing out as like the bad guy, or the man in the middle who is not who can't tell the truth to Duke, and he knows the truth, but he can't reveal it. And you could tell that he cares about Duke, but he has to do his job, right? And I'm sure, because I know Colonel Hawk will most likely, like I said earlier, he's I believe a general in the actual cartoon. So he's going to play a bigger part in this story, most likely. So we do have to have some kind of way to get access to this character. He can't just be a mustache twirling bad guy, right? And this is such a great moment, and it's done without words. It's done silently, completely visually. Such a great moment, and easy to overlook if you're reading fast like I did. Well, let me backtrack to a panel earlier where we see the open panel with this helicopter and a silhouette of Colonel Hawk walking to the helicopter. I just kind of want to bring out this. This is a really cool panel. It's an open panel, no borders, all white in the background. Again, sort of the background's dropped out. Great sort of shapes and shadows on this machinery depicting the mechanical shapes. It's kind of, I always feel like personally that's really hard for me to pull off. So it's great to kind of see it's so well done here. Especially love the spinning propeller on top of the helicopter and sort of the gestural movements where it's like showing the propellers are there, but not quite. They're moving so fast, not even like the artist can capture it. It's always fun. And I love seeing that. And again, great use of silhouette. But let's go back down to the person. We see that Colonel Hawk says, one of our own has become a problem. And we see that he's talking to someone named Krieger, who is a woman who's actually sitting in the helicopter. Now, I didn't know who this was at first, but I did look her up, and apparently this is a character named CoverGirl. So Colonel Hawk kind of brings CoverGirl into this, and he needs help wrangling Duke. And she says, he says, if we're gonna track an American hero down, we're gonna get other American heroes essentially to help us. And we're introduced to two other characters that I'm sure will appear in future issues, which is Stalker and Rock and Roll. Again, tests, allies, enemies, right? We are introducing our cast of characters that will play parts throughout the rest of this story. CoverGirl, Colonel Hawk, Stalker, Rock and Roll, Mercer, Destro, most likely. These are all people that will help or hurt Duke on his journey as he searches for truth. And that's the end of the issue. Sort of a really well done, tight first issue of a very challenging property, I would say. Surprisingly good for a person like me who doesn't really remember much about G.I. Joe, and I'm guessing that someone who has been like a diehard G.I. Joe fan enjoyed it as well. Like getting like insight into like a cartoon character, giving a cartoon character PTSD, kind of giving us insight into what's going on in their head, and the interesting contrast of a soldier kind of fighting against the military in a way in his own search for truth. It's going to be a really interesting journey, and I'm on board. I think I'm definitely going to check out issue 2 when it comes out. As of this video, it's only issue 1 is out, so we'll see where the story goes. But I'm definitely on board. I do wonder a little bit about Duke's journey, in that he is seeking truth, and the truth, at the end of the truth, is a transformer, right? An alien robot. But we know from G.I. Joe that the foil or the enemy is Cobra. So what happens when Duke discovers a Transformer? Why would he care about Cobra? I'm interested to see how they resolve that. I did read another issue that's sort of like a close cousin to this called Cobra Commander. So you get some insight into another character before G.I. Joe and Cobra has formed. And there is like a little spoiler in there that kind of gives you some insight of how like the world of Transformers and Cobra are going to merge. But even outside of a toy property, I would say we've got some really interesting character insights in this that I'm willing to kind of follow along and watch the journey. Now, this is only going to be a 5-issue limited series, from what I understand. And I'm guessing at the end of that 5 issues, they're going to roll this into like a more updated version of G.I. Joe. But yeah, I'm willing to check it out and see what happens. I thought it was a very fun issue. Great art, great colors, great lettering. There were some moments here and there that I was a little confused by, but for the most part, I mean, they were so minor. So yeah, just sort of a great, solid first issue. I think the internet is also enjoying this. So yeah, let's just see where it goes after that. Oh, and if you want to see how I take some of the story elements that I've discovered in my analysis and see how I apply it to my own stories, check out some of my books below in the description below. I've got 2 novels out there right now out on Kindle. You can check that out in the Amazon links below. I hope to have more work out there for you soon, but we're rolling it out slowly. So check it out. Let me know what you think. If you have any other thoughts about stuff I've missed, if you have any thoughts about maybe something I got wrong, or maybe something that you want me to kind of explore, another story that you want me to look at in more detail, please leave it in the comments below, because that's going to help me figure out what people like and are enjoying. And if you like this episode, like, follow, subscribe, and share it with your friends who are also into storytelling and who want to become better storytellers. All right, that's it for issue number 1 of Duke. Thanks for following along on the story grind, and I will see you next episode. Take care. Bye.